And welcome on into this bi-week edition of the Blue Horseshoe Podcast. He, as always, is George Bremer. I am Ryan Hickey. A little bit different this week, again, because of the bye. The schedule is a little bit wonky. We are recording this on Wednesday, the only pod we will be doing this week to allow yourself the enjoyment of enjoying the bye week and kind of taking a weekend off from the Colts. So this is going to be our only kind of pod of the week. Talking a lot of big picture now as we move to really the home stretch. Really, I think Thanksgiving is where contenders and pretenders separate themselves. Colts right now through 10 games are 5-5, right in the middle of the playoff race here, George. Before we get to some discussions about that playoff race and see how it's going to break down, let me ask you this. It's the bye week. How are we spending it? Anything fun? Anything exciting? You going on a beach somewhere like most players do?
Yeah, last year we went to Disney, so that was like an ultimate kind of bye week.
And
This
you
year,
needed that last year. You needed that
oh,
trip.
so badly, so badly. This year, though, just coaching basketball, coaching middle school basketball. So, lots of fun little challenges every day with that. Keep me plenty busy enough.
I just came from the dentist, so that's my big plans for the week. So
I got you beat on that one, I gotta say.
No cavities though, but you do have me beat. Wow, we are living it up here, man.
We
Holy
need to
cow.
stop partying so much. We need to get more focused.
We do. We gotta get our lives in order here. We are living like we are 18 years old again with the crazy lifestyles we are living. But as the bye week, I'm sure some players will be traveling around and maybe enjoying a beach for a few days and getting geared up for a big second half push. Speaking of which, George, before we get to the playoffs, I want to ask you this question here. So we've seen the last 2 weeks this Colts offense sputter and the defense really come to life and play well against the Patriots and against the Panthers. The last 7 games of the season here, if I had to ask you what's more likely to stick around, is it the Colts' bad offense or is it the Colts' good defense? What would you say?
It's a tougher question than it looks like on paper, because I think so much of it, there's a lot of moving pieces here. I mean, for one thing, the defense is going to get back Grover Stewart for sure in a couple of games. They should get Juju Brents back around the same time, if not earlier. So that's 2 big pieces, I would say, to this defense that could give them a chance to build off what they've done against admittedly bad offenses, but you got to start somewhere. You got to get some momentum somewhere. And if you add some more, really difference-making kind of defenders into that mix, you would think that that's going to give them a boost. But on the other hand, a lot of these offenses coming up are better, certainly, than the last 2 they faced. And there's a lot of dangerous offenses left in terms of, like Baker Mayfield. He can be dangerous either way, but he's certainly a guy who could light you up if you're not ready. I think the Raiders have been an interesting team since the coaching change there, and we'll see what they're like at the end of the year. Houston's got arguably the best quarterback in the NFL right now, not even just rookie. The way he's playing. Cincinnati obviously creates a world of challenges. So I think that it's going to be interesting to see how the defense holds up against much tougher competition. But as they theoretically get their guys back, offensively, it's all on the quarterback. I mean, I think that's the easiest statement to make. Can he consistently make plays and keep defenses honest? I think getting Josh Downs back is going to be a big help. It'll be interesting to see how healthy he is coming off the bye week. I think that's huge for him. But I think Josh Downs is right now, the last 2 weeks have taught me, is that Josh Downs is the glue on this offense. He's the guy that keeps things moving. When he's out, you can really look at the second half of the Carolina game and the entire game over in Germany that he was either limited or didn't play at all as the worst stretch this offense has had all year. I don't think it's coincidence. I think it has a lot to do with his ability to win early in routes and to be that guy that gets you 7 or 8 yards and just keeps, if defense have to worry about him over the middle, then a little bit more room for Michael Pittman on the outside. There's a little bit more room in the running game. So I think there's reasons to go on both sides of this, but ultimately I'm going to go with the offense staying bad is the more likely of the two because they need better play from Gardner Minshew. Even Josh Downs comes back, and he will. They need better play from Gardner Minshew, and I think there's a better chance that defense regresses just because the opposition is going to be a lot better moving forward.
Unfortunately, I agree. As a Penn State fan, I watch too much bad offensive football, so I'm sick of watching more bad offensive football, George. I can't take it, all right? I'm tapped out. And so I desperately want to say that the offense is going to improve and get back on the right track. And these last 2 weeks are just bumps on the road. But I can't say you're wrong. You mentioned Gardner Minshew. He's obviously the point man. But it's also, to look at the schedule going down the rest of the way, Panthers and Patriots defenses, it's not like they were, number 1 and number 2 in the league. And it's just, wow, you played some good competition. It happens. All right, maybe you'll get right against some defenses that are, that are not as good. But that's not the case. And you look at the rest of the schedule, Bucks, talent on defense, but the Titans have a hard-nosed defense. Bengals have a championship level defense. Steelers, that's all they have right now is defense. Their offense is even worse than the Colts offense right now. Falcons have a surprisingly good defense, Raiders and Texans do not, and that's where at the end of the year you should be able to hopefully get back on track. But again, we're also saying that coming into the Carolina game and going into the Patriots game, you should get back on track offensively. And we saw a combined 3 offensive touchdowns in those 2 games. So you look at the schedule, and to me, just the schedule alone dictates, I don't see this offense coming out of it anytime soon, in part because they're going to be facing some really tough, tenacious, aggressive, turnover reliant, if you will, or turnover. The defense that force a lot of turnovers, just keep it simple like that. That is right now and not a good sign for this offense moving forward. It's scary.
It is. I mean, they've got to protect the ball, but they've also got to find a way to make explosive plays, and they haven't been able to do the 2 things together. They've had one or the other, explosive plays, but also turning it over, or protecting the ball but not having explosive plays. They got to find a way to mix those 2, and a lot of that is getting Jonathan Taylor going, but a lot of that comes back to Gardner Minshew being more of a threat and allowing defenses to play more honest, giving Jonathan Taylor a chance to make those big plays. So, yeah, I know one thing. It's not going to be easy to run against the Bucks. Not as long as Vita Vea is drawing air.
No, and especially if Ryan Kelly is a no-go in that game, it's going to be all hands on deck in that interior of the offensive line and try to block a mountain of men in Vita Vea, who, he's going to bring it. Outside Aaron Donald is definitely by far the best interior defensive lineman the Colts will face this season. So he's going to be a mammoth of a challenge when the Bucks come to Lucas Oil Stadium next week. But it's tough. I mean, they're still the top 10 in terms of scoring offense. They're outside the top 10 in terms of yards per game. So again, you're starting to really see this offense come back down a light. I think you're going to need this Colts offense to prove both of us wrong going forward if you want to be a playoff team. Because you look right now at the landscape of the AFC, George, Colts are 5-5. I think if you want to be a playoff team, you got to get to 10 wins. I mean, is that the number? Is that the kind of the magic number you're looking at? You think 9-8 could squeeze you in? Right now, the Texans, just to kind of put in perspective here, the Texans are 5-4. So a half game better than the Colts, and they right now are holding the 7th and final wild card berth. You looking at 9, or do you think 10 gets you in?
I think 10 to be safe. The thing that's interesting about the AFC right now is you've got 14 teams. You go all the way down to Denver, who's in 14th place right now, with 5 or fewer losses. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out over the last, month and a half of the season here, because chaos. I mean, every game is going to have such big implications for everybody else. Every win and every loss, you could be moving 4 or 5 spots on this table every week, just because everybody's so tightly bunched and the tiebreakers are going to be changing left and right. It's going to lead to a lot of chaos. So I think 10 wins is probably the safest way. It's hard to imagine at 10 wins not getting in. 9 could get you in, but you're probably going to be in a tiebreaker situation at that point. And, who knows how all those things play out. 8 might get the last spot, the way things are going right now, as crazy as this whole setup is. But I don't think you're going to feel comfortable unless you get to 10.
I would feel safe. I'm with you getting to 10. But it is crazy. Like this NFL season in the AFC has a big college football feel, in the sense that this, like the rest of the season going forward here, the Sunday after Thanksgiving through the end of the year, it does feel like it's almost like an elimination week every single week, because you look at it right now, again, the Colts are 5-5. They are 9th in the AFC. But you look at right now, the Jacksonville Jaguars sit 3rd in the conference, 6 wins. 11th team in the conference right now is the Raiders, 5-5. 1 win separates 8 teams right now in the conference from 3 to 8. We're going to see a lot of shuffling. We're going to see, like I said, each week the tiebreakers are going to change. We're going to see just a total upside down, I'm sure, playoff picture from one week to the next, it does feel like, again, almost like you can have weeks of elimination weeks with tiebreakers going forward here. And that's why this stretch is huge for the Colts, because they play a lot of these teams on their schedule that are playoff teams, even in the NFC, or just teams that they are directly competing against in order to get a spot here, one of the 7 spots. And so 10 wins, let's just go with 10 wins for now. And maybe hope at the end of the season, 9 is maybe good enough to get you in. If the whole team is 9-8 and they have enough tiebreakers, they can get in. But if we both agree that 10, like you're in, like securely in, if you get 10 wins the rest of the year, that obviously means quick math at 5-5. The Colts have to go 5-2 down the stretch. To reiterate their remaining schedule: home against the Bucks next week, at the Titans, at the Bengals, home against the Steelers, at the Falcons, Raiders at home, Texans at home. I'll be honest, does not sound like a 5-2 stretch to me, George. That is tough. That is brutal. There's really only one team right now in the Titans, and they've had the Colts number. And again, it's been obviously a rough rivalry in the last few years there. That's the only team that right now is not playing for something. Everyone else is in the playoff picture or right on the outside of the playoff picture. This is a brutal schedule down the stretch here.
And it's funny because I think all year it didn't look like it. Even
Right.
a couple weeks ago, it still looked like the schedule was really set up. And they all, as tough as it is, outside of Cincinnati, they're all winnable games.
Yes.
But they're 50-50 type of winnable games. I don't know that the Colts will be favored in very many of them. But I also don't think that the spread's going to be probably much more than 2.5 in most of them. Either way, it's going to be really tight. One thing the Colts have got to do is start winning at home. You're 1-4 at home. 4 of these games are at home, and no one's going to survive, not winning your home games. But 4 of these 7 are against teams directly in the AFC wildcard chase. So that, to me, that should be exciting because it means not only are you playing meaningful games down the stretch, you're playing head-to-head, like you were talking about, elimination type of games. These games are going to obviously have a huge impact on where you're at that week in the standings because of what we just talked about and how much variance there's going to be there. But they're huge tiebreaker games too. You're going to have so many of these teams with head-to-head matchups because, again, 14 teams in the AFC are still in this race. There's going to be a lot of head-to-head tiebreakers in that 14 crew. It's going to be critical that they win. I think those 4 games in particular, if you get to 9-8 and you win the 4 AFC games, it might be good enough because you might have the tiebreakers there. If you get to 9-8 and it's 3 wins against, teams that aren't necessarily in that AFC race and maybe just 1 win against those, you might be out because the tiebreaker might not go your way. It's that tight. I really think it's not just, what your record is. It's literally going to be which games do you win.
And obviously the head-to-head tiebreaker, right, is the obvious one and the easy one to talk about. But I think once you look past that, and there's a few, like we just mentioned on the schedule, I think the other tiebreaker, George, fans need to be watching out for, and you just hinted on it in terms of kind of like prioritizing which games you're going to win here. The conference record is going to be huge here. Because right now, that is why the Colts are above the Bills and above the Raiders. With all 3 of these teams being 5-5, it goes head-to-head, right? They've not played each other yet, so there's no head-to-head there. Then it goes conference record. And that's where the Colts do have an advantage. They are 4-3 right now in the AFC conference. The Bills are 2-5, and the Raiders are 3-3. So again, it's not about, obviously, you want to win these direct tiebreakers against the Steelers. That could be massive. Going back, you wish you won the game against the Browns. That could be a massive tiebreaker as well. The Raiders, obviously, want to try to win head-to-head. Like, winning these head-to-head games are huge, but also winning AFC games are huge here as well, because if you're fighting for a playoff spot, which you are right now with the Bills, that is a huge tiebreaker you have. Fighting with the Raiders, well, they have one right now, but maintaining that tiebreaker by beating them is huge. Like, that's where it's obviously you want to win every game. But these AFC games, George, the Titans game, the Bengals game, the Steelers game, the Raiders, Texans, those 5 are massively important, and they count almost double compared to if you lose to the Bucks. It sucks, right? And you want to win that game next week. It's very winnable at home. But if you lose that game, is it the end of the world? No, compared to if you lose to the Titans or if you lose to the Falcons.
Yeah, the Titans are absolutely, those 3 games. between Tampa, Atlanta, and Tennessee, which are the three that aren't directly against teams in the AFC playoff chase. Tennessee is by far the biggest of those three games because, again, it's so much tiebreaker. And whatever chance you have at winning the division still, which is what, a game and a half out, although Jacksonville has a tiebreaker, so it's really two. Even at that point, whatever chance there is of winning the division, that division record is going to become hugely important in that situation. So you've got to beat Titans. That one might count three times. I mean, they also have a division games count twice. Tennessee might count three times. It's that big. And Houston at the end of the year, obviously you're hoping matters that much. You've got to take care of business before you get to that point so that game against Houston could really matter. But when you talk about big picture, the last two games of the year, Raiders, Texans at home, they're both games, right now they're both teams right in the thick of this race with you. The playoffs could start in week 17 if the Colts can take care of business, to that point.
And the thing is, I hate to say it, I just don't know if I don't believe right now they're going to take care of business to make those two games at the end of the year matter, because we just kind of talked about it. Again, 5-5, you need to really go 5-2 down the stretch here. Bucks at Titans, at Bengals, Steelers, at Falcons, and that little short stretch here before you finish with the Raiders and the Texans at home. They are outside of Cincinnati. Like I said, they're all coin flip games, 50-50. So even with that said, I could see the Colts going, splitting the difference there, winning half, losing half. And if that's the case, you go 3-4 in these 7 games. You're obviously 8-9. Still a successful season considering Gardner Minshew playing 95% of the season overall. But in terms of the playoff chase, that's nowhere near good enough to obviously be in the race.
No, and that's, to me, I think you're going to have to just, if you want to feel comfortable going into 17 and 18, you got to go 3-2 in the next 5, and that's not going to be easy to do. You got to win 3 out of, what is it? Tampa, Bucks, Tennessee, Cincinnati,
Titans.
Yeah, you got to win 3 in that group. Atlanta's in that stretch as well. If you don't win 3 of those games, then it might not matter if you sweep the last 2. If you can get to 8-7 going into week 17, then you got a chance, because then you're in a situation where if you win your last 2 home games, I'm not saying you're absolutely in, but you put yourself in a really good situation if you can do that. If you're aiming less than 3-2 in the next 5, you're probably needing a lot of help to get in those last 2. If, depending on how bad it is, you go 0-5, season's over. No matter how tight things are, you go 0-5, the season's over. At 1-4, the season's over. Even at 2-3, you're pushing it, because then you'd be 7-8 going in those last 2. So yeah, it's an incredibly important stretch right now. I know Shane Steichen kind of talked about it yesterday on the video call, and he's saying what you would expect, focus on 1 week at a time, which is what they've got to do, because it doesn't matter. The next week never matters as much. And I think that's where your point about this being like college football, you do have to approach it that way. Like sort of elimination games every week. You never go into college football thinking maybe we can survive a loss this week. That's not the mindset ever. Unless you're just trying to get into the .com bowl somewhere. But if you're trying to win in college football, you cannot have that mindset. And I think that's where the Colts are. They can't have the mindset of even the Cincinnati game. You can't go into that week thinking, okay, it's all right if we drop this one. It may be more likely that you do, but you can't have the mindset of it's okay. You've got to go, because I guarantee you, if they win the last 7 they're in, they may win the division. So the only way to do that is to win the next one. And I think that's the mindset they have to take. Is that likely? No. But if you don't approach it that way, that's where you end up going 1-4 and ended up playing the last 2 games for pride and draft position.
I mean, honestly, speaking of playoff games, I think the more we talk about it, the more I'm looking at the schedule. The Bucks game next week is a playoff game. Mm-hmm. Again, you look at the rest of the schedule. Again, we just talked about the NFC. If you have to drop a game, that's a game to drop. But it's if you really look at it, Bucks at home next week, again, a winnable game at home. We talked about the home struggles. 1 home win is unacceptable so far this season. But at the Titans, that's one of those things too, George. And now kind of talking this out loud and kind of really having the motors in the brain go, the more you think about that Bucks game, if you lose it, look, the Titans are not very good, and they made a quarterback change, and Will Levis has been up and down. But that's, again, Tennessee's a tough team. Mike Vrabel's a tough head coach. They're not laying down, even if they go into that game at, 3-8 or 3-9, whatever their record might be. they're still playing tough and they still want to beat the Colts. And so do I feel good about Gardner Minshew going on the road, record aside, in Tennessee to win that game? I don't feel great about it. And so if you lose to the Bucs at home, and that rolls into losing to Tennessee, then I think you're done at that point. You're 5-7. You got to run the table, beating at the Bengals, beating the Steelers. Falcons have been a good team this year. Raiders, Texans, like that's it. And so, like the more we think about it, like these two games here, Bucs and Titans, I think are going to really dictate if there's reason to believe, or if we're all going to be talking about draft position and Anthony Richardson's return here by the time December rolls around.
Yeah, and there's no doubt. And what does that mean? It means the defense has to keep playing at not necessarily the level it was the last 2 weeks, but it's got to play at a very high level. They've got to be no more 30-point games. You're not going to survive that. And the offense has got to wake up. I mean, they have got to find a way to put some touchdowns on the board. I mean, you were talking about the slump. The last 6 quarters, they've scored 1 touchdown. The last 6 quarters they played. And the last 2 second halves, they scored no touchdowns. So you just can't. That's not sustainable. I think that's pretty obvious to anybody listening. You're not going to get very far with 1 touchdown in 6 quarters. The fact that they won these 2 games doing that says a lot about the competition. It also says a lot about, I think, Shane Steichen understanding, hey, that other offense is not a threat. So we're not going to take big chances. We're going to play conservative. We're going to take care of the ball because we can win 10-6 this week. And so his mindset has to change as well, and it will. You know, I think there definitely is a lot that goes into these last 2 games. But I think the bottom line is your quarterback's got to stop seeing ghosts, and he's got to make better passes. I mean, I don't know how many times the last 2 weeks you had open receivers that just weren't hit. Overthrows, low throws, wide throws, you name it. There were chances to make plays that weren't made. And there were a couple other plays that were made that were just outstanding catches by the receiver. You need more consistency from your veteran quarterback. That's going to open the running game. That's the key. You want to go 5-2 or 4-3 over these last 7, which you're going to need to do one of those 2 to be in the conversation. You need Jonathan Taylor running at Jonathan Taylor levels, and you need a quarterback who's keeping the defense honest. And then you need a defense that's not going to give up, 2-score leads. So right now, are all 3 of those things going to happen? I would not think so. But I didn't think they'd be 5-5 at this point either. So they've proven that they can, exceed expectations. Can they do it one more time here when the games matter most?
I mean, really, you just need a quarterback to not take the ball and run backwards for 20 yards. I'll take this from
the playbook.
Hike, run back. Could be. I mean,
they'll tackle wall play, run backwards, and throw deep.
You know who Shane Steichen needs to bring in this week on the bye week? Keep Gardner here in Indy. Have him practice at the facility. We need Patches O'Houlihan. Because if you go back to dodgeball, what was one of the trainings he did? Have the guys run in traffic and dodge the cars. If you can dodge a car, you can dodge a ball. Maybe we should have Gardner Minshew do something similar, George. Have him go in the main street, dodge cars, because at least then he'll actually feel what pressure is like. And then he won't just get bugged out when there's no one around him and feel like faint pressure. Maybe that's what he needs. Maybe he needs to feel the heat in order to realize, oh, this is actually more dangerous than what I'm doing in the pocket here. I can calm down, I can stay in the pocket, and I can be safe and not unnecessarily run out of there when there's no pressure on my face. Maybe that, George, that is the answer going forward here.
Maybe start with wrenches, and then build your way up to traffic. But yeah, no, that's been the issue, right? I mean, dodging a pass rush that's not there. If you stay in the pocket a little bit more and you read the field a little bit longer, there were open receivers on Sunday. I think anybody who watches the All-22 will see that. But the quarterback is running around in the backfield and not looking downfield. Even when he does, I mean, that's the whole point about moving backwards is critical, because even when he is looking downfield, how many throws are coming off the back foot? You're not stepping into it because you're not moving forward. I mean, I'm not great. I didn't do well in physics, but I got that part. When your whole body's moving forward, you step into a throw. When your whole body's moving backwards, you tend to float it. And that's, I think, what we're seeing a lot of that right now from Gardner. So is it all on him? No. There are things they can do in the running game, even against these boxes they're seeing, to be more successful. There are things I'm sure the receivers will tell you that they can clean up to be more available. I'm sure the offensive line will tell you that there's things they can do to be even better than they have been. That's the thing about football at the end of the day. I think Andrew Luck used to always say it's the greatest meritocracy. You get what you deserve. And I think it's one of the reasons I think so many of us love this game is it's the ultimate team game. One guy blows his assignment, it doesn't matter what the other 10 did. And I think they all understand that. So it's never just one guy. But there are definitely obvious things that we can see just from watching on TV or watching on the sidelines that the quarterback can do better right now that would make great strides for this football team.
Absolutely. And you keep stepping back and floating it. Again, he's not throwing a lot of picks recently, but you're going to get some opportunistic defense coming up here that'll make you pay for it. And we've seen this Colts, like we're talking about the margin of error being very thin for this defense. When you're scoring 3 offensive touchdowns in 2 games and 0 in the second half, your opportunity here to allow touchdown drives is slim to none. Having extra turnovers that really have not been a main problem the last 2 weeks would absolutely exacerbate that problem. Like I said, lead to losses here. It's critical, George. It is absolutely critical. I like the physics lesson. I guess really the only thing is that physical lesson applies to 99% of guys. Maybe not Anthony Richardson. Because that arm, he could be running backwards on his back and still flick it 65 yards, no problem.
I don't think science applies to Anthony Richardson. I don't. I think I told you after the combine that watching him throw was something else because of how easy, just flicking that wrist, going out there. You see it in pregame, when he was out there warming up, which I kind of hope. Aaron Rodgers is going to get out there and do some things with the Jets. I know that Richardson's not coming back, and it's shoulders, so it's going to take longer. But it'd be nice if by like week 18 he could just go warm up again, But obviously you're not going to push anything. There's no reason to get that shoulder ready, get him ready for next year. You see how important he is, though, to this offense moving forward. The running game was completely different when he was out there. And it's not just him running, the threat of him running. I mean, you go back and look at that Zach Moss 56-yard touchdown and watch the way the defense reacted to Anthony Richardson, and it completely opened that play up, and off went Zach Moss. That's why so many people are so excited about what the Jonathan Taylor, Anthony Richardson marriage could look like in the future. But, we're not going to see that till, May, I think is when they get back on the field together. You got to make do with what's there right now. And I think the biggest things there is, and it sounds simple and it is, but it's a lot harder to do in practice, is just assignment football right now. Everybody do their job. I think that's the teams that win. That's what you're seeing. And defense is getting there. I think that's, aside from the fact that they played much easier competition the last couple of weeks, they also you didn't have the miscommunications. You didn't have the obvious breakdowns that you've had, throughout the year. That's critical. Get your big guys back, play sound assignment football, and you're going to have a chance to win every game.
You are right about that. And one time or one game, I think, honestly, George, hate to say it, think will be ruining here if the Colts do fall short of a playoff spot, don't go 5-2 down the stretch. Speaking of mistakes, is that Browns game going back a few weeks ago, week 7, where you turn the ball over 4 times, you allow short fields and defensive touchdowns. Again, controversial ending with the referees. Bad call, but still you put yourself in a position to, or 2 bad calls, right? Thank you. 2 bad calls, where you put yourself in a position to let the refs dictate the outcome of the game. And now, especially as we're recording this on Wednesday with the news that Deshaun Watson is out for the rest of the year. And so now the Browns are going to be 6-3 without their starting quarterback. That's a game where you talk about tiebreaker head to head. Colts win that game. Forget about them now being 6-4 and in a playoff spot. You also have a crucial tiebreaker against a team that is holding on for dear life. That, George, I hope this is not the case, but absolutely could be a reality. We could be sitting here in middle of January saying, man, that Browns game is where they lost any hope of a playoff spot.
I mean, you can really go to one play, I think. It's neither of the penalties. I mean, those are obviously, they were game-turning penalties. No one's saying that, but you get yourself in that position and then bad things can happen. 3rd and 10, and they give up 30 yards, and all of a sudden the Browns are at midfield. You stop that there, and they're facing 4th down. It's a whole different ball game. Instead, they've got a first down near midfield. I think the next play was a long run. They were in field goal range all of a sudden, and it just, their whole mindset changed. The way they were playing the rest of that drive changed completely. And obviously the calls, which the NFL apologized, so everyone feels better, right? Everyone's okay with that now.
Jim's
But
happy.
yeah, it's set. It's all cleared. But that also is when you talk about the margin for error being so tiny, that's how it is in the NFL all the time. Each of these 7 games are likely going to come down to the fourth quarter. That's the way the NFL plays. And it's probably going to come down to a handful of plays. Make a stop here, get a first down there. That's the difference. And I think, I can't remember which coach it was. It might have been Jim Caldwell, who always said, more games are lost in the NFL than are won. And what he's meaning about that is turnovers, miscommunication on 3rd and 10 that allows a 30-yard reception. Those are the things generally, because the talent level, as much as we like to think like, Kansas City to Carolina is this wide gap, and it is, but it's not nearly as wide as you think. Everybody in the NFL is there for a reason. There are no, directional schools on your schedule here. There is no homecoming game. Like, you have to bring it every week. And most games, no matter who the matchup is, it comes down to about 6 plays.
You're right. And even like to boil it down even more, like if Shane Steichen calls a run late in the first half instead of a pass that leads to the Myles Garrett strip sack recovery in the end zone for a touchdown, or if he decides I'm not going to use Blake Freeland along with, I think it was either Kylan Granson or Drew Ogletree, I forget which one, but use a rookie right tackle and then also a tight end that's not exactly equipped to block to try to stop the most unstoppable player in the NFL. And Gardner doesn't get sacked, or even if he fumbles and doesn't get sacked and you're covered for a safety instead of 7 points, like you take 5 points off the board. We are talking again about a drastically different game. It can come down to something as small as one decision about how to block Myles Garrett. And if you should have ran the ball on 2nd down instead of throwing it for the first half of a game in week 7, could be the difference between the Colts going 9-8 and being in the playoffs with a tiebreaker, or sitting at home at 8-9, coming close. And again, sitting at home in January, it truly does. I think you're 100% right. You lose more games than you win, or more games are lost than are won because of stuff like that. Browns are a great defense. And again, the Colts have to, bare minimum, go 4-3 down the stretch. Bare minimum, just even, make that play relevant again and look back on what could have been lost to the Browns. I think it's just tough enough with the schedule down the stretch here, but that could be one where if the Colts are 4-3, and just on the outside looking in of a playoff berth, that's a game I think we are going to go back to and need to circle, as that's where, that one play truly changed the entire trajectory of the season.
Myles Garrett, also science does not apply to that.
Yes.
A blocked field goal where he basically standing jumped over an offensive lineman. That's not normal. And that's what's not fair about award season, by the way, because Deshaun Watson being injured and out might be the reason Myles Garrett isn't Defensive Player of the Year, and that's ridiculous.
You're right. And that also makes sense why they do the broad jump at the combine. I'm like, why do they do that stupid thing? And now you see, because Myles Garrett literally broad jumped in the real game. Holy cow, that's still a few weeks later, still amazing. Still absolutely amazing. All right, George, official prediction. Colts are 5-5, big 7-game stretch here. Bucks at Titans, at Bengals, Steelers at Falcons, Raiders, Texans. At the end of the regular season, will the Colts be a playoff team?
I don't think so. I don't, because I haven't seen the consistency, and you're going to have to be consistent through the schedule. Like we were talking about, they're all winnable games with the exception of maybe Cincinnati. They're all 50-50 type of games. But the way you win 50-50 games is by being consistent, doing your job every snap for 7 straight weeks. I'm not to the point where I trust this team to do that right now. And they don't have that difference maker. They don't have the Myles Garrett. They don't have, that eraser out there, although DeForest Buckner certainly tries, who can overcome those mistakes. I think that's the other thing. The teams that have a little more margin for error, they're the teams that have a Patrick Mahomes. They're the teams that have a Jalen Hurts. They're the teams that have a Myles Garrett, because they can help you out. They can make those plays in your favor. I don't think the Colts have that right now. They do, but he is, only played 4 games this year, and he's recovering from shoulder surgery.
Yeah. It's good for the future. It's exciting. And again, I think that's why, even if they miss the playoffs, it's definitely not a disappointment whatsoever, because just the fact that we're even having this conversation and not being homers and not being unrealistic is a huge testament to this team and to Shane Steichen for getting them in this position with a guy, again, that you took number 4 overall and started and finished one game. But unfortunately, I'm with you. I don't think this is going to be a playoff team, and I don't think we'll be sweating week 17 and week 18, just because I don't think they've earned the benefit of the doubt to believe that even in the stretch of Buccaneers, at Titans, at Bengals, Steelers, at Falcons, that they go in that 5-game stretch 4-1. If they go 4-1, then you're sweating. Then you're like, oh my God, here we go. Even 3-2. I just don't trust right now some of those trap games and tough games. I can truly sit here and say that they're going to go 4-1 or even 3-2 right now and have it be a fact. So I don't think they're making the playoffs. And I don't think, unfortunately, we're sitting here. Well, I was going to say almost identical to 2 years ago when you had in 2021, the Raiders at home, second last game of the year. Now this one is the Texans. You had the Jaguars on the road week 18 to finish off that season, but almost, George, almost identical to 2021's ending.
You know, it's scary too. They played on Christmas Day that year against Arizona. So a team that started with an A and had a bird mascot, and they'll play on Christmas Eve this year against Atlanta, which is the same thing. Then the Raiders at home. All that has to happen is for Gardner to get COVID that week leading into the Raiders game, and it's a replay. But, you know, the other one you could go back to is 2018. Where they were 5-5 because they had rallied. It was 4 straight wins instead of 2. And they had a divisional opponent on the road. And it ended up being the Sunday night game, the Titans and the Colts, the epic matchup between Blaine Gabbert and Andrew Luck there on Sunday Night Football. And the Colts getting the playoffs that way. So, you know, maybe call back that one and say Sunday Night Football, week 18, calling it now, Colts Texans for the final wild card spot in the AFC.
I saw, speaking of which, I'm glad you brought that up. Taylor Lewan was on a podcast recently, and he told a story about Blaine Gabbert, how when he came in, I'm pretty sure it was that game, that week 18 game, was, oh, guys, don't worry, I'm going to tear it up. Like, defense, you get the stop. Like, don't worry, I got it from here. Wasn't the first drive, right, a pick 6 that started early in the game, that started that game off the right way for the Colts? Thank goodness. That was a good time. That was a good time. That'd be nice. Which, by the way, I mean, if we're both wrong, the Colts take care of business here, and they are, let's say, 4-2 down the stretch here, going into week 18. That Colts Texans game, we talked about them not having a primetime game. That is absolutely a candidate for primetime. Young rookie quarterback in CJ Stroud. Colts team right now holding on for dear life for a playoff spot. Nothing screams Sunday Night Football NFL regular season finale like CJ Stroud against Gardner Minshew. George, sign me up.
I guarantee you, if CJ Stroud's in that game and there's a playoff spot on the line, it will be the Sunday night game, just because you're going to have a rookie trying to get into the playoffs. Everyone's going to be glued to that one. So unless there's, I mean, you know, the way the AFC is, if there's a division that's being determined that night, you know, then, like, I don't know, Baltimore and Cincinnati maybe play. I don't know. Not looking at the week 18 schedule right now, but, you know, if one of those other games is determining a division title, that's what would bump it. If the Colts and the Texans go into that game and a wild card spot's on the line, it'll be the Sunday night game. Now, that's a big if. But if.
For optimistic fans out there, well, actually, I was going to say even George and I's picks are way better this year so far than last year. Yeah. I was going to say our picks have not been exactly accurate. This year is different. Not great. I think we're both hovering right around 500, but nonetheless, still
scattershot this year. You know, we're
kind
of like the team. We're up and down. We have good weeks and bad.
We have shocked the world, though, that we're sitting here with a decent record through 10 games. Everyone is equally shocked. That is for sure. All right, that'll do it for this bye-week edition of the Blue Horseshoe Pod. Getting set for a big 7-game stretch here, a massive one against the Buccaneers next week as well. So Lucas Oil should be rocking. Make sure you check out the Blue Horseshoe Pod on YouTube. Subscribe. That's where the post-game show each and every week will be. Also, check out our podcast wherever you do get your pods, Blue Horseshoe Pod. Have a great rest of your bye week. We'll talk to you next week right here on the Blue Horseshoe Podcast.